Our first presenter tonight has been with us, I think, 4 years now. And he was introduced to this ministry through Bruce Malone. Is that right, Bruce? Daniel Currier? Well, I don't know. Anyhow, he reached out. He came and auditioned with us, and we liked his message. And so he's part of the team now 4 years. His wife is somewhere around here. There she is, Sister Tori with the babe. And he's a professor up in Peoria area. And so he's going to come. He's part of the team. We're so grateful for Mr. Daniel Curry. Thank you for his wife, Tori, and the baby. I don't know what the baby's name again is. Gavin? Gavin. Oh, well, I think the governor of California is Gavin too. But anyhow, he's going to come and share with us the first lecture of the night. And then after this, we're going to have a song and a special tribute to remember Carl Calley. Amen. All right. Come on, Mr. Daniel. You got it. Thank you, sir. Thank you. God bless you tonight. Let's enjoy us, folks, and glad y'all are here. Amen.
All right. Plastic people, I'll get into that in a second here, but before I get into that, when Dr. Boyd called me about this event this weekend, he told me that he received an honorary doctor's degree, right, Dr. Boyd? So let's give him a round of applause for that. One thing that's really cool about working with now Dr. Boyd is that whenever you work with him, he's always bragging you up more than what you really are. In fact, as a speaker here, I just received my PhD. So that's really cool. The way it's going, if I stay here for like 5-10 years, I'll have like 5 PhDs and 10 master's degrees. But I do back up. I do have a PhD in pharmacology. So, all right. In the 1940s, there was this comic strip called Plastic Man. Have anybody ever heard of Plastic Man before? He would change shapes and stuff like that to fight crime and all that good stuff. But when we in our society think of plastic, what comes to mind? Fake, cheap, man-made, right? Those types of things, throwaway. I'm kind of using that word in that same type of context with plastic people, where people in our society today are man-made, moldable, cheap, that type of idea. To back up, I'm going to ask a rhetorical question, then I'm going to ask you a question to give me some feedback here. First question is, I just want you to think about it just for a second, what makes us human? What makes us human? So the question I want you to answer is, what makes us different from animals? Anyone? Image of God? Loud. Spirit? Communication, yes. Speech. Inventiveness, yeah. Technology and stuff like that. Now, here's a question that you maybe have never thought about before, or no one ever asked you. I don't know. What makes us different from angels? We have bodies, right? We're physical bodies. We're physically human bodies. And that's one area that we're majorly different than angels. Most of us, and then kind of switching that a little bit here, most of us, when we think about, like, let's say plastic surgery, we think about plastic surgery in the sense that we want to go get maybe something fixed to make us look more human. Maybe even for myself, like I had my teeth fixed, which is not really plastic surgery, but it kind of is. I had my teeth fixed. Let's say someone has cleft plates, or spina bifida, or overbite, or someone has some prosthetics, or maybe even removing scar tissue. We're trying to look more human. One of the things in society that's been bugging me for the last few years is this extreme body modification. And this is just one of the topics tonight, so this is just kind of introduction here. Extreme body modification. These people have spent thousands of dollars and many, many, many surgeries to look like Barbie and Ken. Now, besides being a waste of money and maybe a waste of time and a waste of self-focus, I'm wondering if they are elevating their personal autonomy above God's design, their personal glory above God's glory. Now, at this level, it looks pretty simple, like, okay, whatever, it's not a big deal. And the next one is just a little bit worse, but maybe not that bad. This next one is people who are trying to look like elves. Now, some of these people have had surgery to make their ears look pointy. Some of these just have little ears that they stuck on. But they identify, at least one of the girls in here identifies as an elf, which is kind of strange. And she's had surgery to get her ears to look pointy, the middle one up there. Her ears are surgically created to look pointy. Now, this is kind of weird, but it gets even more freaky. It seems like people are using this extreme body modification to look like maybe monsters or evil monsters, and that's what kind of freaks me out. How about some of these pictures? Why would you do that? Isn't that crazy? And then it gets even worse. This one guy up here, he had his nose cut off and his ears cut off. They implant little horns and little nubs in their head and stuff like that. Just really strange stuff going on. Plastic surgery, mass tattooing, piercing, and studs seem to be moving us away from God's design in these people's lives. It seems that I identify as is taking precedence over normalizing our body towards God's design. Are we trying to use our body to glorify God or to glorify ourselves, to get attention or whatever? Now, this lady is on TikTok. She identifies as a bug. That's her pronoun, so she wants people to call her bug. So, her personal pronoun. Really strange. Okay, kind of a big overview of what we're going to be doing tonight. We already talked about extreme body modification. We'll be looking at this a little more, especially when we get into transgenderism. We'll be talking about LGBTQ, rejecting the human body design that God created. We'll be talking about the radical green movement that has denigrated human beings, that we are of very low value. We'll be looking at some of the Marxism and things that has spawned, such as communism, progressivism, Nazism, fascism, stuff like that has wrecked human beings. And right along with that, we'll be looking at woke ideology, right along with last night, because that too is very anti-human. And then the culture of death, which would be including things like abortion and things like that. I will just be focusing on abortion just for the sake of time tonight. But all of these denigrate humanity, God's design on human function. There's three underlying principles that I want you to kind of know as we go along here that are very, very important as we talk about these topics. And these will help guide us through these different main items that we were just discussing here earlier. In early 2000s, I took a class in technology. I had a technology background besides biology, and the class was on robotics. And one of the movies I was supposed to watch in this was, and we discussed it, was the Bicentennial Man. Has anyone seen this movie? Okay, so interestingly enough, the star is Robert Williams. He's a robot, and has AI, and it so happens that it's almost at a human level. And besides, minus all the fluff of the story, there's a few key points that I want to point out. He always wanted to look like a real human being. So physically, he looked like a robot, but he always wanted to look like a real human being. So he had different designers through the years create his body to look more and more human. So, but the real self, though, was his AI. His real self was his computer program, if you want to think of it that way. As new body designers came and went, as the years went by, he got new body parts and looked more and more human. So his body was kind of moldable. The second thing I want to kind of point out is that at the very end of the movie, if you didn't want the spoiler, but it is, he wants to be fully human, and to be fully human is to actually be mortal, to die, to ultimately die. So he has some sort of chemical injected into his artificial body that eventually would kill him, make him a mortal being. So death was part of being human. I'm going to kind of hit at some of those issues throughout this talk, especially near the end when we hit the Christian response, the biblical response, Jesus' response to the ideas of plastic people. To start out, though, I want to talk about a concept that Francis Schaeffer, Nancy Pearcey, and many others have talked about, the upper story and the lower story view of truth. A lot of times in philosophy, people call it the fact-value split. It's a split between postmodernism and modernism, a split between the Enlightenment and the split between the Romantic eras. So the upper story of truth would include the private, subjective, relativistic, morality, theology. These are things that you have in your mind you can't touch. The lower story includes the public, the scientific, the objective, things you can touch and feel, that's things that are testable. Modernists claim that the lower story is the primary or sole reality, the facts and the science. The postmodernists, however, are saying, wait, the upper story is reality, and that the facts and science are just mental constructs. Nancy Pearcey says this: the key to understanding all the controversial issues of our day is that the concept of the human being has likewise been fragmented into the upper and lower stories. This concept I just gave you, it might be kind of complex, but it helps us understand the deeply dehumanizing view of our culture today. The promotion of abortion, homosexuality, assisted suicide, transgenderism, the free sex, the sexual chaos that's going on in our day and age. She goes on to say, secular thought today assumes a body-person split, with the body defined in the fact realm by empirical science, lower story, and the person defined in the values realm as the basis for rights, the upper story. This is a very fractured, fragmented view of humanity. It devalues the body of the person. The second principle I want to talk about, I talked about the upper story, lower story principle. The next principle that goes right along with it is our culture's focus on feelings. Our culture's focus on feelings. Now, some of these things are not necessarily bad. Some of these are bad. Some of these are not. God is our granddaddy for our pleasure. That's kind of how culture thinks about God. He's just there for when I need him. Personal autonomy reigns supreme. How I feel is most important. You see these types of things in our culture a lot. Follow your heart, follow your truth, be true to yourself. How many of you have heard those phrases before? I hear them all the time. I want you to feel good, be happy, and have pleasure. That's very common out there. I have a friend who left Christ. I guess he's an atheist now. He doesn't really want to talk to me, I guess. I don't know. But I talked to him for an hour or two, and he was telling me that he wanted to leave Christ because he wanted to be happy. I'm like, okay, that's strange. God, I guess, cramped his life, maybe. I don't know. He also raised the objection, like, why would a good God who knew everything create humans that he knew would experience pain, evil, and suffering? And I asked him this, it's like, well, you just told me a few minutes ago, which he did, that he wanted to eventually get married, have a family, and have kids. I was like, so you are criticizing God for creating humans that are going to go through pain, evil, and suffering, but you want to have kids, and you know those kids are going to go through pain, evil, and suffering. Right? He had no thought, he had no answer to that. He had really no good answer for that. We live in a broken world. That's the reason why we have pain, evil, and suffering. Focus on empathy. Empathy is a good thing, but we can't stay at empathy. Empathy is a big phrase in our culture today. Good, but it's just step one. We need to go deeper than that. We focus on painless births, painless lives, painless deaths. I like that. That's not a bad thing. It's just that that's our culture. We don't want pain. We have a cancel culture. You offend me, so I'm going to cancel you. Divorce because I don't feel the love anymore. Love is just a feeling. Love is just a feeling. No, love is not just a feeling. That's just one aspect of it. So, since everything is just based upon feelings, and since some unborn babies don't have feelings, they can't feel pain yet, then they must not be human. Have you ever thought of that before? That's one of the arguments that people give, which is really strange. Because feelings doesn't make you human, necessarily. Besides the point, Darwinism is the third item I want to really hit home in this discussion tonight. Darwinism. Darwinism, or Darwin, taught that all life came from a universal common ancestor. He also said life was all related. And if all life is related on planet Earth, humans aren't really special. Look at this tree of life. We're just one of the many creatures that came out from our single-celled ancestor millions of years ago. Thus, human is devalued. We're at the same level as any other creature on planet Earth. If there is no God, materialism is true, and so he embraces materialism because he does not think that God exists. Nature designed our body, thus we're just part of nature. If there is no God, then there's no God's moral will, so the only entity that should be making decisions about us would be us. We can impose our will on our body. The body is a clump of matter to be manipulated, and evolution has helped along with eugenics, which we heard about, I think we heard a little bit about that last night, along with abortion and body modification. Yes, we do have animal-like characteristics, such as, we're biological, we're sexual, physical, we eat food, all those types of things, but we also have other characteristics as well. We have a rationality in other topics that we just talked about earlier. God created us with a mind, body, and soul. We were together. It's a one entity. It's not fractured, as today's culture seems to suggest. Back to Nancy Pearcey here. We tend to think that materialism, which Darwinism embraces, is a philosophy that places high value on the material world because it claims that matter is all that exists. Yet ironically, in reality, it places a low value on the material world as purely particles in motion with no higher purpose or meaning. You're all physical, so you might as well just live it up. Body obsession isn't, when people focus on the body, remember those previous slides? Body obsession today doesn't mean we accept it. Obsession, she says, with the body can reveal a mindset akin to that of a luxury car owner polishing and tuning up an expensive automobile. It's a focus on, the focus on young plastic bodies is a mindset that shows hatred towards the real body. And you can see this in today's culture with people who are so focused on things that are actually not bad, like exercising, dieting. Those things are good, to have good diets. Bodybuilding is fine. But the people are focused on anti-aging. We don't want to age. We want to have plastic surgery and Botox. We're very focused on our body to make our bodies look young and young and beautiful, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just when we take it to the extreme, there's some concern with that. Now, that's with the whole item of materialistic thought. Now, going back to Darwin's view of everyone being the same level, dehumanizing humans, putting us at the same level as the rest of organisms on Earth. When I first saw these two memes online, I thought they were done by the Babylon Bee. They were not. These are real memes from PETA. These infographics tell us that we should show social justice to animals, and we should not show speciesism. So instead of saying to kill two birds with one stone, you should be using to feed two birds with one scone. Instead of beating a dead horse, feed a fed horse. Or on this other side, it also had this. Instead of using chicken, calling someone a chicken, say that they're a coward, or instead of a pig, call them repulsive. Because why? Why? Because it's speciesists. Because you're elevating your own species above these other animals. This is concerning. It de-elevates humans. It devalues humans when they say stuff like this. Wesley J. Smith, who's a bioethicist, he says this kind of folly is entirely predictable when nature becomes an objective of quasi-worship. It is what happens when humans so degrade the worth of their own species that they consider themselves to be merely another aspect of the natural world, neither more or less important than any other fauna and flora. Humans are no longer exceptional. The next few slides are coming from a video put out, you can find it on YouTube. It's titled Darwin's Impact on Society in Under 3 Minutes. I took some screenshots of it, so I'm giving reference to that video, so if you want to watch the whole thing, feel free. Darwin, some quotes from different famous people. Darwin, there is no fundamental difference between man and the higher mammals in their mental faculties. As zoologists, humans are no better than bacteria. And a geneticist, a worm represents a very simple human. Another geneticist, in essence, we are nothing but a big fly. Guy who wrote Green Rage, he said this: Darwin invited humanity to face the fact nature has revealed not one scrap of evidence that humankind is superior or special. You're not special. That's what he's saying. Infamous or famous, or however you want to look at Peter Singer, one of his most infamous quotes is, the life of a newborn baby is less value than the life of a pig, a dog, or a chimpanzee. That's crazy. He also went on to say, Darwin's theory undermined the foundations of the entire Western way of thinking about the place of our species in the universe. And Darwinism does do that, very much so. All right, so those three things, the fact-value split, or the upper story, lower story, Darwinism, and our culture's focus on feelings, kind of underlie the ideas that underlie the rest of this talk. So with those ideas, we'll be hitting some of these big issues that are in our culture today. The first one is the LGBTQ movement, the family breakdown, the rise of homosexuality, and the rise of transgenderism, which is also considered extreme body modification at times. Dennis Prager once said in one of his talks that the two videos, the PragerU videos that he gets the most hate for, are the ones where he makes a case for God and for the family. That is really strange. The videos that he makes a case for God and the family. During the past 40 years, we've seen a massive decline in the family, the rise of divorce and remarriage, the rise of shacking up. A Christian friend of mine told me that he tells his kids that they should shack up with a partner for a year before they get married to see if they're compatible with each other. I'm like, what? You call yourself a Christian? Did you ever read the Bible? So you see what happens when there's a family breakdown. It causes a lot of harm to society, to the kids. No, sin is not a private thing. Sin affects everyone. It affects society especially, and our kids. Thus, we see one of the aspects of this family breakdown. We have seen the lack of sexual morals. We've seen the rise of other immoral sexual activities, such as LGBTQ, and the normalization of that, the acceptance. And now we're not just supposed to accept it, but we're supposed to promote it and celebrate such activity. And if you don't, you're a hater. However, God created us as males and females with counterparts. Eyes are for what? Ears are for? Wings are for? Feet are for? Yeah, God created us with a specific form that has a specific function. And when we say no to God's design, we are ignoring God's signposts to say these items or these things are for specific functions. We're saying, no, I know better. I know something that I don't want God to tell me what this is for. Homosexuality actually ignores God's design, and it places the upper story in a higher category than the lower story. It divides the human being into two categories, upper story, lower story. It says, oh, how you feel is more important than what your body is, how God created you. These are three famous people, well-known people in culture. First one is, the first two are actually males, and the last one is actually a female. The first two, they feel like they're female, so they feel like they're a female trapped in a male body. The last one is a female who thinks that she is trapped in a female body, but she really feels like she's male, except for the fact she just had a baby, I think a few years ago. There's another one too. I did not throw up a second picture of another girl who had a baby who looks like a guy. That one was a Tristan Reese or something like that. Very similar to the last picture there. You see, transgenderism is extreme body modification. It is extreme body modification. And where we elevate the mind or the feelings above the physical body. Now, think of other situations in life when this happens. We are concerned about those people when they do that. For example, this girl here, her name is Emily Hewitt. This picture was taken in 2018. She has anorexia. And she says anorexia's body dysmorphia messes up your perception of yourself. The trouble is eating disorders warp your sense of normal. Food was bad. They were making me fat. She does not look healthy in here. And she did not know it. She did not know it. Your mind can be wrong. And we are broken human beings, and usually is. That's why we have to align our thoughts, our mind to Christ's mind. Amen. Now, one of the most concerning things, I'm concerned about adults doing this, but one thing that's even more concerning is when adults have children do this. This boy's name is James. There's the back of his dad right there. That's James right there. His mom, I think his dad and mom are separated, but his mom is trying to transition him to be a girl. James Junger's mother is, I think, some sort of doctor, and so she dresses him in dresses and trying to transition him with chemical castration, sterilization, and sex change surgery. And because his dad does not want him to go through this all, his dad has lost custody because he's not willing to help pay for these surgeries. So if you do want to donate, this is a great time. Go to Give, Send, Go. By the way, this is a good time to recommend Give, Send, Go as a donation site. So if you need money, or if you need to donate money, or have someone who needs money, go to Give, Send, Go. Stop going to GoFundMe. GoFundMe is a more of a leftist organization, it seems like. They keep kicking Christians off. And for Christian ethical purposes, they keep kicking them off. So go, Give, Send, Go. You can find Save James there, and you can help them out. But this is really sick. This is really sick. I would put this in the category of child abuse, maybe, I would say. Now, I have a question for you. Who said this? Okay, ready? Who said this? The idea that an 8-year-old child or a 10-year-old child decides, I decide I want to be transgender. That's what I think I'd like to be. It would make my life a lot easier. There should be zero discrimination. Joseph Biden, yes. Yeah, that's really concerning. All right, next topic. The rise of green. The rise of green. The culture that we're living in is promoting this green culture, which is not necessarily bad. I mean, I want energy efficiency. I do not want to hurt the earth. I want to take care of the earth because we're called to be stewards of the earth. Not a big deal, except for the fact that today's day and age is not just taking care of the earth that God gave us, it's that humans are bad. Question for you. Has anybody ever seen any of these pictures before? The top two pictures are from Florida. They're a site that's called Coral Castle. Some guy in the mid-1900s, he built it all himself. We do not know for sure how he did it. I'm sure there's YouTube videos that try to explain it, but as far as I know, we don't know for sure how he built this all himself without any big earth-moving equipment. Somehow, he moved these stones and put them in place. He said he figured out how the ancients moved stones, but I don't know. That's a mystery of our life, this monstrous mystery. How about these megalithic stones down in South America? Has anyone ever seen those before? There's all sorts of megalithic stones down in South America. It's crazy how they get there, who put them there, who made them. Or how about this one, the pyramids of Mesoamerica, the Central America. Those are monstrous structures. Or how about Cahokia Mounds down in St. Louis? Has anybody been down to St. Louis, the Cahokia Mounds? Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It's really close to here. I think in Ohio there might be some, and I think there's another site in Illinois too that has some mounds, but this is the largest mounds, the Indian mounds. We don't know for sure why all this stuff's here or how it came to be. Sometimes we know who, but we don't understand how they did it or why or when or whatever. One item that's really curious is a structure down in Georgia. Has anyone ever seen this structure before? The Georgia Guidestones with the 10 Commandments to the Age of Reason. We don't know for sure who financed this. All we know is that the construction company who put this up was given a call and sent a check to say, do this, and they did it. So somebody who had tons and tons of money or some organization, and we're assuming it's someone who's fairly, I don't know, this happened in the 1970s, someone who's really rich and powerful, we assume. That's at least my assumption, but we don't know for sure. 10 commandments, 10 rules on here. I'll give you 5. 5 most interesting ones for our purposes here. The first one, maintain humanity under 5 million people. We have billions of people on this planet. So what's going to have to happen? That's concerning. What do they want to do? That's weird. Guide reproduction wisely, improve fitness and diversity. Unite humanity with a living new language. More of a one world type of mindset. Let all nations rule internally, resolve external disputes in a world court. Again, more of a worldwide new world order type of idea. And the last one was interesting. Be not cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. How do you get rid of cancer? Ooh. What's he talking about here? What are these people talking about? I don't know. It's kind of scary, though. Someone who has lots of money and seems to have some power to get things done. But this is the concept. This is the mindset in today's day and age. Nature is good. Human impact is bad. Primitive peoples are romanticized. Life-saving fossil fuels are bad. However, we forget that they prevent hunger and nakedness and exposure. Humans are devalued in the green movement. But if you think about this devaluing, this is true human racism. This is truly racism against the human race. Because remember from last night, there is only how many races in the world? One race. We're all human. We're all human.
Amen. Amen.
Alex Epstein says this. We don't take a safe climate and make it dangerous. We take a dangerous climate and make it safe. No matter what, climate will always be naturally hazardous, and the key question will always be whether we have the adaptability to handle it or, better yet, master it. Climate in our day and age, in the 21st century, is not dangerous because we use fossil fuels. Climate is dangerous because we don't use fossil fuels. There's so many people living in poverty and sickness in other third world countries who do not have access to cheap, clean energy. 2020, Independence says, how long to save the planet from climate catastrophe? The clock is ticking. 7 years, so I guess we only have 6 years left or something like that. Al Gore, famous Al Gore. I'll let you read that one. Everyone knows Al Gore and what he thinks. The world's falling apart. We're into a period of consequences. The Guardian, 2018, says we have 12 years to limit climate change catastrophe. 12 years. That was in 2018, so it was 3 years later. Yeah. Interestingly enough, Alex Epstein also said this. When you hear scary claims about a climate crisis, keep in mind that climate catastrophists have been claiming climate crises for 40 years. For example, Obama's science advisor, John Holdren, predicted in the 1980s that we would have up to 1 billion climate deaths today. And this is false. It's never happened.
Amen.
The experts are almost always, almost always focused on the risks, not the benefits. And guess what? If the story bleeds, it leads. Bigger the prediction, more pain, evil, and suffering. Oh, it'll lead. People like to read it. It gets more views. When we look at the recent past, that was supposed to be so disastrous, we should look at flourishing, and that, of course, includes the quality or lack thereof of our environment. We need to understand that cheap, reliable energy from fossil fuels save lives, or same with nuclear and stuff like that. But those who are green oppose it, but these things are actually saving people's lives. Think about it this way. Stop and think about this for a second. Food. Who grows your food? Unless you grow it at home. Farmers. What do they use? They use tractors. What do tractors use? Diesel. Diesel is fossil fuel. You wouldn't have your food on your table without fossil fuel. Not counting the technology and all the energy that required to make the tractors and all that stuff. Hospitals use technology. Plastics are all used all around us. Plastics are used in hospitals. Without plastics, the hospitals would not be as high-tech as we have today. All these things that we have for energy, for all these things that we have in our day and age, we have to thank fossil fuels for. And to indict it as some sort of evil thing is kind of concerning. Even our indoor climate control, would you like to be sweating right now with little fans, or do you actually enjoy the climate control? I enjoy the climate control. Name one animal that can use fire like humans. Fossil fuels, we use it to create fires, like coal and oil. Combustion engines, we got here with combustion engines. Everything in this room, look around you, all around you. Can you find one thing in this room that was created without the use of fire? We as humans have a unique ability to not only use fire, but we also have the unique ability to actually harvest fossil fuels and nuclear and other things for our use. Interestingly, when I was growing up, my mom would cut our hair, and my younger brother, when she cut his hair when he was a little boy, he was kind of active, and he didn't want to sit there to get his hair cut. So she would light a fire to mesmerize him so that she could cut his hair, just at least for a few minutes there. But fire does mesmerize us. It brings us together, and we're unique among all the other organisms on Earth that actually use fire. Just a side tidbit there. All right, so I'd rather you have clean heat, temperature control, quick transportation, better healthcare, indoor plumbing, cheap, plentiful energy, refrigeration, and much food, advanced technology, instead of all the other stuff on this other side here. I actually enjoy our technology. I actually enjoy our advancement, pro-human advancement. So if we have the capability to save life like this, I would argue it would be immoral, it would be racist to get rid of this cheap, plentiful energy. Criminalizing extracting from, this is Wesley J. Smith again, criminalizing extracting of oil from tar sands would chill large-scale energy production everywhere in the world, which would result in terrible harm to humans, including wild inflation and the cost of heating our homes and transportation and food to the market. If you thought the economic shutdown of 2020 was bad, getting rid of oil would make it a million times worse. Epstein also says this: to me, the question of what to do about fossil fuels comes down to this: what will promote human life? What will promote human flourishing? Realizing the full potential of life, how do we maximize the years of our life and the life of our years? Very powerful statement there. And lastly here, he says this: as we have used more fossil fuels, our resource situation, our environmental situation, and our climate situation have been improving too. More fossil fuels, more resources, better environment, and safer climate. This is what has actually happened against the grain of today's society. But again, we get people like AOC who want to push a Green New Deal. She said this, and I think it's 2018, and 10 years left to implement the Green New Deal before cataclysmic climate disaster. So I guess we only have, 7 years, something like that. This guy here, Justin Haskins, he says this: the Green New Deal has been hailed as one of the most important proposals to tackle global warming in decades, but don't be fooled, it will absolutely do nothing to reduce global temperature or prevent future temperature rise. The real outcome of the Green movement is something else. It's socialistic programs and to grow the government. Wesley J. Smith agrees to dig deeper into the ecocide advocacy, and the typical anti-free market ideology that drives too much of the environmentalism today comes clearly into focus. And thus we see CNN posting things like this week actually. CNN, we don't have any more time. They say for decades scientists have warned of extreme weather. It would be more extreme, and climate change we're living in now, says Biden. And he goes on, luckily Biden does have a plan. His plan is to throw more money at it. More money at it, trillions and trillions of dollars. Bigger governments, more socialistic programs, things like that. Which leads me right into the next topic of socialism. Marxism, communism, Nazism, fascism, and yes, even woke ideology. I found this quote by this Twitter personality to be very true, if you think about it. Oh, sorry, my bad. He says this: real socialism has never been tried in the same way that real capitalism has never been tried. The difference is almost socialism resulted in the impoverishment and death of hundreds of millions of people, while almost capitalism has lifted billions from absolute poverty, and this is so true. Look at these numbers here. These are just estimates. The numbers could be way higher than this. And by the way, yes, Nazism and fascism are socialistic political systems. if you actually read the literature. China, 65 million people probably died. That might be a low number. We don't even know for sure. Soviet Union, 46 million. Again, I've seen different numbers from different sources. Fascism and Nazism, probably at least 20 million, maybe more. Cambodia, 2 million. These are just some of the numbers. There's many other socialistic, Marxistic countries, fascistic countries that have killed even more people than even what I have here. And then this rises, so we move from socialism and Marxism to the next socialism, and that's called identity socialism, also called woke or things like that in our culture. Marxism and Nazism, I would argue, have grown into a monster with these crazy appendages. It's no longer just economic disparities. It's no longer just in the fascist world or the Nazi world, differences in like ethnic backgrounds or races, but now wokeism is now focused on other disparities too: sex, gender, income, age, race, power, ability, etc., and keeps going on and on. Every disparity, every difference in people's lives or different segments of people's lives are being pitted against each other. Woke focuses on disparities of power and privilege. Social justice is a term. It's not true justice, not biblical justice, just FYI. If you want to talk to me later but let's go back to the biblical justice, which is where we should go back to the Bible to look for our justice, not to some Marxist thinker like D'Angelo or Kennedy or something like that, which I've read. All disparities are racist and need for redistribution, and so this is the end result. If you read Kennedy, which I'll be pointing out a little later, Kennedy argues that pretty much capitalism is racist and racism is capitalism, and to get rid of capitalism is actually would bring in Marxism or some sort of socialistic policy, which would help decrease racism. Okay, so this next thing is, I'm not sure if anyone's ever seen this one before. Has anybody ever seen this infographic? This made its rounds online maybe about a year ago, and it's a lot longer than this. This is just one slide. This is just one part of it. So the National Museum of African American History and Culture from the Smithsonian Institute Museum, they put out this infographic. And they talk about the aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. Now, if you go to the BLM website, the BLM organization website, it talks about the difference between a white culture and black culture. And it's not necessarily always about being dark-skinned or light-skinned, even though it kind of assumes that. It's kind of fluffy and flaky, kind of depends on what you kind of mean by stuff. But a lot of times when they say white culture, they say people with a European descent. And so the opposite of that is someone from black culture, which means if you are from a European descent, you believe this, which I assume that the opposite of this would be black culture. I think it's dehumanizing to those from African descent, just my opinion. If someone would say this is white people are the opposite of this, I'd be like, whoa, this is not me. For example, a rugged individualism, like what? So if you're rugged individualism or have this idea of rugged individualism, you are from white culture. You're not the black culture is the opposite of this. How about this? The nuclear family is a white culture. So if you have a nuclear family or promote a nuclear family, you're promoting white culture. I think that is kind of demeaning to those of African descent, myself. Objective, rational, linear thinking. Some of the most rational people I know are people of African descent. This is crazy. Like, why are we criticizing this? The opposite of that, yeah. Hard work, the key to success. These are just some of them. I'm just hitting some highlights. Here's some more too. Christianity is a norm. This is crazy. Or how about this? Respect authority. Or have some sort of time schedule. Or how about holidays based on Christian religions? Or how about justice? More of a biblical view of justice. The common law kind of comes out of the biblical view of justice. Or how about this? Competition must always do something about the situation. So if you don't think that you have to do something about a situation, I guess, yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what to make of that. Or how about this one? Be polite. Dr. Boyd, you're one of the most polite people I know. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. If someone would say this about me, I'd feel very offended and dehumanized. I think it's sad. That's my opinion. Racism. According to Kendi, this is Abram X. Kendi. He wrote a book, How to Be Anti-Racist. When he's saying racist, it's not necessarily, he's not talking about racism necessarily like how we usually think of racism from the 1970s. He's talking about disparities. Any type of disparities is considered racism, I guess, in his mind. At least that's how I read him. If you have some more thoughts on that, feel free to talk to me afterwards or in Q&A, and I'll be more than happy to learn more about this. But I've read his book, How to Be Anti-Racist. And racism is rooted in the patriarchy and capitalism. Capitalism and racism are conjoined twins. To be anti-racist, you have to be anti-capitalist. Capitalism is essentially racist, and racism is essentially capitalist. That's just crazy. Capitalism has brought millions and millions of people out, billions of people out of poverty. Amen. Socialism, the opposite. And this is kind of what his discrimination thing, his most bombastic quote of all, I think, is that the only remedy for past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy for present discrimination is future discrimination. I'm really concerned with him and Robin DiAngelo's. I personally think they are promoting actual, true racist ideas. And it's really concerning to me, and it's dehumanizing. So pretty much what happens is it demoralizes people of European descent, and I think it dehumanizes people of African descent. Amen. It's not helping. It makes wars, it's just not helpful. It defies humanity. It should not be there. Culture of death, abortion, suicide, eugenics. I cannot get into all of these. I'll just hit abortion real quickly here. There's this organization called Christians Engaged, and no, Christians Engaged is not some sort of marital service or engagement service or dating or wedding organization. It's an organization, a political organization, run by Christians, promoting the Christian worldview for politics. Well, this year the IRS rejected, but then later accepted, their tax-exempt status because Bible teachings are typically affiliated with the Republican Party and candidates? Wait. That doesn't make sense to me. Isn't that, that's just concerning. And then the things that they said were things like, this is the quotes they pulled off of Christians Engaged websites, why they rejected them. Like, Christians Engaged argued for the definition of marriage, the biblical definition of marriage, biblical justice, law and lawlessness, freedom of speech, religious liberty, human trafficking, and the sanctity of life. Why aren't those like all our views? It doesn't matter which party you are. This is concerning to me that we as a society have said, oh, only one political party promotes this stuff. I don't understand this. Well, the opposite of sanctity of life is something called the quality of life debate. And the quality of life debate pretty much says that if you have certain aspects or certain functions, then that makes you a human being. Nancy Pearcey says it this way: just being biologically part of the human race, the lower story, is not morally relevant. Individuals must earn the status of personhood by meeting an additional set of criteria, the ability to make decisions, exercise self-awareness, and plan for the future, and so on the upper story. So in other words, she's saying is that the quality of life people, she's a sanctity of life person, she's arguing for the sanctity of life, she's saying the quality of life people say that if you do not meet these criteria, you're not a human. If you do meet them, you are a human person. Non-person is just a body, a disposable piece of matter that can be just thrown away. That is why some think it's totally fine to kill the unborn and sell their body parts, because they're not a person. They're just a clump of cells. However, since Roe versus Wade from the 70s, 62 million babies have been murdered in what's supposed to be the safest place on planet Earth, the mother's womb. Iceland cures Down syndrome by testing for people with Down syndrome, babies with Down syndrome, and if they have Down syndrome, then they abort them. This is really concerning. Smith goes on to say this: we live in an ironic age. Some people are being stripped of their personhood, while at the same time, the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees have been granted legal rights. And in his book, The War on Humans, which is a great book, if you ever get a chance to read it, do read it, he talks about this, how different countries are now granting the natural world legal rights, and that's really concerning. Going back to abortion, though, it's not new. A form of abortion would be child sacrifice. It happened in the Bible. Over 20 times the Bible talks about certain people passing babies or passing their children through the fire, and that means sacrificing their kids on an altar, on a burnt offering. In the ancient times, babies were offered to the god of Molech. Fire was kindled in a bull-like structure, it's a bull-like idol. It got really hot, babies were set on the arms, and pretty much died. But it's not just Molech, it's not just the Middle East where this happened, where life was disposable. We can see this around the globe, all through history and all through time, and all different places throughout the world. We can see the history of people sacrificing other people to their gods. The Aztecs infamously sacrificed thousands and thousands of people on their pyramids to their gods. And then they cannibalized them too, which also included cannibals in the times when Columbus came to the New World. He met many cannibals. If you want to read some of the primary sources, do read the primary sources. Don't read some of the pop culture things about Columbus, because you have to go back to the original sources. Nearby, interestingly, about these cannibals, and the cannibals and the Aztecs, they would farm out communities of people to sacrifice and to eat. They would have communities of people where they would pen up there specifically so they could eat them and sacrifice them to their gods. So why did the ancients sacrifice babies to Moloch? Well, they want to manipulate the gods to control their destinies. Our God today is self, and so killing unexpected or unplanned or disabled unborn babies is done to try to control our destinies. The same ideas, the same end goal. All right, the final topic and the exciting topic, because this is the positive. This is the Christian view that is an answer to this anti-human world we live in. We are created in God's image. We were given as his viceroys, if you want to put it that way, his co-creators, his gardeners. We are here because he gave us his image. We have been given free will, language, and rationality. We have the ability to create, to design advanced designs. We have been given duties and morals and responsibilities. We have eternal souls. We appreciate, interestingly enough, we not only appreciate beauty, but we also make beauty. We appreciate beauty, but we also make beauty. We desire to know and learn about history and keep history. There's no other organism on planet Earth that cares about history. And interestingly enough, we intrinsically desire to worship and have a relationship with God, some God. But the Creator God is who we would advocate everyone to, because he is the God, the creator of all life on earth. And we are designed to reflect God's glory and his desires on earth. We are his gardeners. We are here to take care of his earth. Amen. Genesis, let's go back to Genesis. This, again, the biblical worldview answers these anti-human views of the world around us. The Bible says we're made in the image of God. We're created to have dominion over the earth. The total opposite answer that the secular world has. And we're made male and female. Each one of these items hit right at the heart of today's culture. We're formed from the dust of the ground. That means we're physical. And God breathed the breath of life into us, making us a spiritual being or having a spiritual soul. Again, we're dualistic, extremely dualistic and tightly dualistic in nature. And this will come up a little later, Genesis 2:17. The first people, Adam and Eve, ate of the forbidden fruit, caused death, the tree of knowledge of the good and evil, and the loss of innocence. So in other words, we have an integrated physical body and soul. We're more than just brute beasts or just spirits, and we have dominion over the earth, and we're moral creatures. And we're broken, we're fallen, which we'll come back to in a minute or two here. Nancy Pearcey says, Christianity holds that there exists both body and soul, matter and spirit, and these two substances causally interact with one another, but neither can be reduced to the other. We're integrated unity, body, and embodied soul. This is really important. She goes on to say, everyone who is human is also a person, and the two cannot be separated. This view avoids the radical devaluation of the human life. So this is a very important point, okay? This is a very important point. Because the next point I'm going to make is this, along with this, is that when someone dies, which is really relevant because we'll be honoring someone who just passed away recently here, we are saddened. We're torn. So why are we so sad when someone dies? Why are funerals so sad? But at the same time, there seems to be a paradox or a tension there that we know that they have gone on to a better place, right? We have this tension. But innately, we know that there's something wrong. There's a splitting of the human being, a fracturing of the human being, the body and the soul. It's not supposed to be this way. God created us to live on earth and never die. We die because of sin. Something's wrong. We know something's wrong. It's not supposed to be this way. We're not supposed to die, but we die because we sinned. So death rips the soul and the body, and because humans are broken. Now, the high view of the human body is also Jesus came to earth in what? Did he come to earth as an angel? An angel's body? No. He came to earth in a human body. He must have held the human body at a high value. He put on flesh and blood. He ate food. He walked on earth. He slept. Jesus even wept. And have you ever wondered why Jesus wept at the death of his friend, at the graveside of his friend, when he was just going to rise him from the dead in a few minutes later? That makes me tingle a little bit. Why did Jesus weep? Because he knew that it was caused by sin. And it's not supposed to be this way. It's not God's original design for us to die. We're supposed to have eternal bodies, if you want to think of it that way. That's at least how I look at it. However, there is something interesting about Jesus. This picture kind of illustrates it. He rose from the dead. This is something very unique within Christianity, the resurrection. Jesus' resurrection, he was resurrected with a new body. But interestingly about this new body, he still had the old scars. Someone said the only man-made thing in heaven will be the scars on Jesus. Isn't that crazy? He still had the scars. He had interesting abilities. He could walk through walls. So this new body has these abilities that we don't comprehend. But he still had some sort of body. How it all works, I don't know. No one knows. It's just as that's how it is. In fact, the early church buried because Jesus was buried. They buried their dead because Jesus was buried. Respecting the body for the hope of the resurrection, opposed to the pagan cultures which would cremate the bodies of the dead people, which was very disrespectful, they thought. Tertullian, an early church father, said church funds were used to support and bury poor people. Lactatius, another church father, said this: the last and greatest office of godliness is to bury the burying of strangers and the poor. That's interesting. They took the body so seriously. They took it, put it on such a way, they valued it so much. N.T. Wright has a famous quote that says, life after death. That's N.T. quotes saying that we have life, but life after death, meaning that after our life, after we die, because we're still alive after we die, but there's going to be a resurrection, later resurrection. 1 Corinthians 15 says this, but if there be no resurrection of the dead, then is Christ not risen? If Christ be not risen, then our preaching is vain, and your faith is also vain. If there's no resurrection, if you will not have a resurrected body as a believer in Christ, after the last trump and all that stuff, our faith is in vain. Corinthians goes on to say this, Paul in Corinthians says this, but now is Christ risen from the dead and become the firstfruits of them that sleep, for he must reign till he hath put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. The dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed, for this incorruption must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? John says the same thing. There shall be no more death. Behold, I will make all things new. Yeah. Romans says the same thing. A new creation, the creation groaneth. Yeah. And we're waiting for the redemption of the body. Philippians says the same thing. I may know him, the power of the resurrection. I may attain to the resurrection of the dead, says Paul, who still change our vile body, that it may be fashioned like unto his glorious body, according to the working whereby he is able even to subdue all things unto himself. God is still God. And as a Christian, someday you will have a resurrected body. Yes. The body is valuable. Don't let anybody say that you're not valuable.
Amen.
All right, quickly, just wrapping up here. I have a new book out, just so you know. Some feedback on it that you can read up here if you want. Go back out to my table afterwards, after everything is done, after the 2 talks and everything else. There's another friend of mine, actually, he read it. Very intellectual guy, interesting. So grab your copy today. Talk to me up back there. I also have a digital copy as well, Kindle and stuff like that. So thank you.